friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here today to talk about simple ways that you can add, in more natural ways, more exercise to your daily routine. And this is focused more on people that are either just too busy to set aside an hour to work out every day, or people who have different health ailments, injuries that might prevent them from being able to do their normal type exercises, or you're just getting older, so you're trying to find ways to still continue to burn calories and keep your strength up that don't rely on a lot of heavy weight lifting or impact type training. First, I'm going to bore you a little bit with my history just so you can know where I'm coming from. So most of you know, you've been following me for some time. I've been a dancer all my life. I taught ballet and martial arts both. I have a black belt in each of 2 different types of martial arts, and so I taught that for several years as well. So I've been a very active person all my life, and through the years I've had to change my exercise routine according to my schedule, health issues, and many other things. Now, obviously, being a dance and martial arts instructor for quite a number of years, I taught dance for like 27 years and martial arts for maybe 8 to 10 years, somewhere around in there. I was getting the exercise there doing that. But since I only taught martial arts twice a week, dance 2 to 3 days a week there while I was in my 40s, I started building onto my exercise routine just to make sure I was really keeping my strength up and also keeping my weight down. And then back in my 20s, I was also big into weight training and got actually pretty buff during that time. Of course, the shorter you are, the easier it is to see the muscle mass build up, and even taught people weight training at our local gym that was in place at the time. It's not there anymore. And I was also teaching aerobics, and I started my own dance business right about that same time. Again, mostly focusing on ballet, but we did also do a little bit of tap and jazz and some other types of dance, but ballet was the main focus, since that was what I was most trained in. So while I was in my 40s, one of the things I was doing was, this room is actually a pretty good size room. This is where I used to teach all of my martial arts and ballet classes, and the room itself is 1,100 square feet. And it wouldn't look so now because now it's totally changed, but I used to actually jog around this room because around here it's always raining. I'm not one that likes to walk in the rain. I'm talking pouring down rain. That's what it's actually doing out there right now. And that's not my cup of tea. And plus, I prefer being more private about the way I exercise. I don't like being out there in front of everybody exercising. I actually mapped out how many laps it would take to equal a mile. And I would make sure that I would walk one direction for 10 laps and the other direction for 10 laps, and I keep doing that until I had a couple miles put in. But I would mostly break it up during the day. So I did quite a bit of it early in the morning, like as soon as I would get up. And then I would do some other things, then come back and do, several more laps. And I'd keep track of that so I know exactly how many sets I had done. And then when that changed after a while, I decided I didn't want to do that anymore, because sometimes we just also get bored with the routine. And I started doing jumping jacks. I was doing up to 1,000 jumping jacks every day. But when that started taking a toll on my joints, I decided it was time to back off and find some methods that didn't cause so much impact on the joints, the back, the knees, and all that. So I started doing what I called a modified jumping jack, which didn't involve actually jumping, but was more of a leg lift. But I would also use my arms so that I could still keep working the arms, because here's the thing, the more movement you're getting all throughout the body, the more calories you're going to burn, even if you're not holding any weights. And then when I started YouTube, a lot of things in my life were changing at that time. Not just starting the channel, but retiring from the dance and martial arts and turning my teaching more towards YouTube and doing the stuff that I do now. And then a lot of other things going on, just a lot of things kind of changed. And then going through menopause, starting the whole menopause cycle shortly before I started my YouTube channel, caused a lot of things to have to change. Being at YouTube, to actually edit videos is hours and hours of work, and it's a lot of just stationary work, which I find easiest to do sitting down rather than standing up. I've had to find other ways to continue to still be able to keep up my strength or rebuild my strength and to burn the kind of calories I would normally have burned teaching dance and martial arts, where I was always on my feet. Before I go into what I do now, let me talk a little bit about what I find most important when it comes to this, because a lot of this also came to be in the way I do things now as a result of, okay, back in the day, people didn't have gyms. They didn't have to go to gyms to get in shape or stay in shape. Why was that? Because people were doing a lot more physical labor, and that was what we were created to do. And so when I look at what were the type of movements people would do every day, washing clothes by hand, grinding grains into flour, or grinding coffee for that matter. And then gardening, you're lifting, you're carrying, you're bending, you're digging, you're planting. There's so much that's involved in just doing a garden itself. So those were the things I was looking at. And that also includes running a treadle machine. So if you're someone who sews or you're getting into sewing, I recommend getting a treadle machine. Now, I'm not sure, mine is the Genome or Genome, whatever it's called. I've had it for 9-ish years now, I think, and I love it. I'll never go back to an electric machine for several reasons. One is I'm able to get the exercise while I'm sewing. Even though I'm having to sit down, I'm pumping those legs. It's working my lower back, my quadriceps, my calf muscles, and even my hamstring and my glutes all at the same time. Even the abdominal muscles. So you'll know if those abdominal muscles are sore and you're doing an exercise, you'll know that exercise is actually working those. So it can be a really great exercise just sewing. Right now I haven't had the time to do as much sewing as I normally would do. And so I'm not getting that exercise now either. And now that we have a motor on the grain mill, I'm not getting the arm exercise. Yes, I could go back to doing it by hand, but that's so time consuming and my time is becoming more and more precious. So as such, I've had to find ways to be able to get more exercise in my daily activities that's not requiring me to take up a bunch of extra time, as well as is going to fit into my schedule so I can continue to keep getting things done that I need to get done. With that in mind, I want to come back to focusing on, okay, is there something that you could do differently that would cause you to be, one, more self-sufficient, as well as getting more exercise and saving money at the same time? So coming back to the sewing machine, a treadle machine, I don't have to rely on electricity, so I'm saving money that way. I can sew just as quickly on a treadle machine as I can on an electric machine. So it's not costing me any more time. I'm burning calories and keeping the strength up in my legs all at the same time. Plus I'm making something myself, so I'm saving money that way. Think about some of those different things. Kind of look at the way they used to do things back in the day. Now some of the stuff won't apply to you or won't apply today, but some stuff can, depending on the direction you're focused on. If you're looking at being more off-grid anyway, there's a lot of things that you can do that will not only require more exercise, but will mean less dependency on public power to get it done. So same, just like with the grain mill, being able to, that was why I got that grain mill. And I used to grind all the flours by hand, but it could take 15 minutes to an hour to get just a single cup of flour, depending on the type of grain that I was grinding. So as I got busier with YouTube and trying to keep up on that, and then the skirt orders and then the other things that came up, then that's why the motor became very handy. So I can have a couple of cups of flour done in just a few minutes with the motor. So that saves me time, but that also means, okay, what other things can I do to keep working on my strength? So again, I want to stress, looking at just the more natural ways of movement, what can you do or add that will save you time, as well as also being able to get more exercise in. And then if you are one that, let's say you're in a wheelchair, and so there's not a lot you think that you can do. Well, actually there's plenty you can do even when sitting down. And one of those things would simply be isometric. That would be contracting different muscles, whether it be your glute muscles or your hamstrings, or the muscles in your arms, your abdominals, and so on. Contracting them and then releasing, and then contracting and releasing. And even if you're able to at least move your legs, maybe you do have movement in your legs even if you can't walk, maybe you can at least do some leg lifts from the knee down. If you can't do that, maybe it's simply just taking your foot and rolling it around one way and rolling it the other way, because every little bit is something. So one of the things I've said before, and I remember reading years ago on one of my health magazines when I was a kid, sitting up is better than laying down, standing is better than sitting, walking is better than standing, and then if you're a runner, running is better than walking. But that's not always the case. Running is not always better than walking, but that was just a general guideline. So the point being that a little bit of movement is better than none at all. So if you're like me and you're having to sit for hours and hours in front of a computer, then what can you do while you're sitting there? Find ways that you can move yourself. If you can do that easily enough standing, then I recommend having your computer set up at a table or a counter where you can stand and do a lot of your work there. That's not very feasible for me for several reasons. One having to do with my eyes and the need to have the distance away from the computer and not standing at the computer. So that's just one of the many. But just my whole setup and everything that I need around me, it's easier for me to sit on the floor and do all that. Where I get most of my exercise, though I do some of it while I'm sitting there, sometimes it's just the squeezing of the muscles while I'm sitting there, or just finding ways to move, wiggle around, do something so that I'm at least moving and keeping the joints lubricated. But where I get the most of my exercise, aside from doing the gardening and that kind of stuff, which is great exercise right there, most of it is when I'm doing things in the kitchen. So when I'm making something from scratch or I'm doing the dishes, this is one of the reasons I like doing the dishes by hand rather than relying on the dishwasher that gets used maybe once or twice a year. Is that while I'm standing there doing the dishes, I will do leg lifts. I will do side leg lifts. I will do back leg lifts. And I'll do that the whole time that I'm doing the dishes. And I'll be keeping track of how many I'm doing. And then to get the front, like more of the quadriceps worked, then I do squats here and there throughout the day. I try to get those done early in the morning, and I'll do 80 to 100 squats a day. And then I'll also do front leg lifts when I'm doing things like maybe folding the clothes or listening to something or watching something that I'm trying to learn from on either YouTube or listening to pastors or whatever it is. And that's when I'll do my front leg lifts. And if I'm not doing something with my hands, then I make sure always, whether it be front, side, or back leg lifts, I'm always moving my arms. I'm always moving my arms so that there's that extra added movement that's going to also raise that heart rate a little bit more and add more calorie burning to that, as well as working those muscles. And again, keeping the joints lubricated just by moving is important. Of course, being an Italian, I'm always moving my hands anyway, so it's probably not really all that important. But at any rate, and a lot of this stuff can also be practiced. Say you're in long commutes. There's a lot of stuff you can do in commutes. When we used to drive into town once a week to take our Taekwondo from our instructor in there, well, that drive is, it's over an hour long just to get in there. So I was doing a lot of those isometrics on the drive in and back. Even though I was getting exercise at my Taekwondo class, I would still try to use that time to do some other things to keep working on my muscles and burning calories. So whatever it is you're starting, whether it be from a sitting position, a standing position, whatever it is, just start small. Don't feel like you have to do 1,000 of this or that all at once. The first time you get started, start small. Maybe, especially if you've never done anything like that before, then start with doing, let's say, 5 leg lifts each way, once a day. And then build on that, go up to 10, then 15, then 20, and so on. And then once you get to that point where it's like, well, I don't have time to do any more than that because now I'm done with my dishes and I'm done making this bread and I'm done cutting up these onions and potatoes or whatever it is. And so now I got to move on to something else where I can't do the leg lifts, like I have to sit there and work on a video. Then consider doing something like adding weights. Now, this is something I just got back into. When I was a teenager, I had ankle weights that I wore every day to school. I'd wear them all day long, especially on the days where I wasn't having dance classes, so that I could still, just as my daily movement, walking from class to class, because I went to a pretty big high school, and it was quite a trek to go from one end of the high school to the other. And just doing that alone was something where I'm building the strength in my legs and burning more calories at the same time. Anything where you're adding more movement and more weight to that movement is also going to build up the heart strength as well, which is very important, obviously. And so these particular weights, I was really excited because the ones I had, I can't remember if they were 1 or 2 pound weights that I had when I was a teenager. They weren't as tall as this, but the reason why is because they were just a set weight. These particular ones came with a bunch of little 1 pound weights like this. This is sand in these. And then each one of these sections is a pocket to put a weight in. So right now, I have 2 pounds plus this, and that's what I'm doing right now. And I'm not sure, I'm thinking of adding the 3rd weight to it. I was really only interested in just having a couple pounds because I don't want to add too much stress to my joints at the same time. But by adding the weights, that means when I'm doing the leg lifts, if I get to where I don't have enough time to do more than 100 leg lifts front, 100 to the side, and 100 to the back on each leg, then by adding the weights, instead of having to add more leg lifts, I'm adding the weights. I'm still working on building my strength and burning more calories at the same time without taking the time needed to do more of the leg lifts. Unless I happen to have it, then I will. I always set myself up for like a minimum of X amount of leg lifts, and then I add to that as I get stronger and feel better. So I'm to the point now where I'm thinking of adding a 3rd weight to these. This is where one of the weights are. It's a little bit of a pain to get them in and out, but anyway, you can just slide it in as needed. You can also use something like this on your arms. I'll link to this particular set below. It may not be for you. You may not even want to go above 1 or 2 pounds anyway. So it would be cheaper just to get 1 or 2 pound weights that you can use on either your wrists or on your ankles. The main thing was that I wanted to make sure I had that option to add more weights if I wanted to, or even if I did want to put them on my arms and start doing curls and different things like that to work my upper body more. And I might even get another set of weights just for that, maybe. We'll see. But right now, this is where I'm at, and it really does, just doing this again, getting back into the leg lifts and doing the weights to make up for the time, because right now, obviously, I'm not out digging around in the garden and hauling things around. I'm inside a lot more. So being able to get this activity in a way that I can work into my schedule throughout the day, I feel so much better already, just that alone, plus a few other things that I've been doing differently. Not that I felt terrible, but we always go through those moments where it's like, gosh, I don't feel as good as I used to do. And I know part of that for me was simply not getting as much movement as I normally would do. And there was something else I wanted to touch on the leg lifts and why I work each direction. The front of your thighs, that's where your quadriceps are. The back of your thigh, that's going to be your hamstrings. So that's something else I'll do, is I'll do what I call hamstring curls, doing the full leg lift. That's going to work more in the gluteus than the hamstring, but doing the hamstring curls where you're just lifting your ankle up behind you, but your knee is still pointed straight to the ground, that's going to work those hamstrings that are right there at the back of the thigh. Then of course you have the calf muscles. Actually, ballet is such a great exercise anyway because it's a lot more gentle to the joints, except for when you get into the bigger jumps. But the type of movements they do and the stretches are very good for the joints and the muscles all around, but just going up on your toes and then back down, and which is actually the ball of your foot. No, not talking about going on the tips of your toes. That's a different thing altogether, but going up, what we call demi-point in ballet, and then back down, that's a good exercise just for your calf muscles. And then you have your adductors, which are the inside of the leg, your inner thigh, and you can work those by doing, when you're doing the front leg lifts, you can turn your leg so your knee is out and do your leg lifts that way. That's going to work the adductor muscle. And then doing the leg lifts straight up to the front is going to work more of the quadricep. Now I do them with the leg turned out like you would in ballet. I'm trying to work my adductor more because when I do my squats, I'm already working my quadricep muscles. And then when you lift to the side, you're working what we call the abductors. Abductors because it's pulling the leg away. Adductors on the inside because they're bringing the legs back together. So that's how you remember the names of those. And then, of course, you know, if you're concerned more about the arms and the strength training, you have your biceps and your triceps back here, especially for us women as we get older. Sometimes these tricep muscles can start getting a little bit flabby. So doing any kind of movement, whether it be with weights or without, simply by going like this and extending back behind you is going to work the tricep muscle. But again, think about the natural movement. Sometimes adding weights isn't all that natural in the way that a lot of people lift weights. Even though I was big into weightlifting, and there's a lot of benefits to weightlifting that I could certainly see during that time. Again, I think especially as we get older, looking at the natural movements that people would do. And back then, people didn't just set aside an hour and do a whole bunch of hard workouts and then, sit down all the rest of the day. People were moving all day long. So even on those days where I'm doing a lot of video editing, I don't sit there and edit a whole video all in one sitting. I get up, I move around, I find other things to do. I'll do some of my leg lifts or find things to do in the kitchen where I could do leg lifts in there, or go outside and pull some weeds or do some digging, depending on the day and what I can do, so that I'm breaking it up. That's actually the more natural way to do things. And so for me, I've always found it best to spread my exercise throughout the day, but always starting the day off with some kind of movement, because when you start the day off with some kind of movement, even if it's just a few leg lifts or a few squats, or a few crunchies to work your abdominals, something that's going to raise your heart rate and wake you up, that's going to set your body to be more energetic for the rest of the day, and you're going to find it easier to keep up on those exercises throughout the day. Rather than going, okay, I'll do my exercises this afternoon, but by then you're exhausted. Even if you're not physically exhausted, you're just exhausted from all the work, whether it be mental stress or whatever it is you're doing, that now you don't have the energy or time to put into those exercises. But when you start the morning off with just something small, then that's going to get you set for the rest of the day. And I find that always has been helpful for me, and it keeps me energetic all day long until evening, and then I crash and I sleep good as a result. And that's the other good thing about the more exercise and movement and natural sunlight that you can get during the day, the better you're going to be able to sleep at night. Good sleep also plays a very important part in weight management. So believe it or not, and the stronger, the more muscle mass you have. I'm not talking about being big and buff. I'm just talking about having muscle, any kind of muscle, making sure that just being strong all over your body for whatever it is you need to do. The more muscle you have, the more calories you burn even while you're sleeping, because muscle simply requires more calories. That's why trying to get some kind of strength training in some form, it does not have to be putting a whole lot of stress on your body. It can be just doing 1 pound, 2 pound weights. That can, especially as a woman, that can be all you need to do. And yes, I used to do the big heavy weights. I was doing the fly presses and the bicep curls and all that stuff. And that was a different time in my life. But I do still believe in keeping those muscles fit and strong, because we need to be strong for the things that we got to do, especially as we start seeing what's going on out there, and we're seeing what's happening right now, and we're seeing where we're headed. It's going to be very important for us to be in the best physical shape that we can be in. So eating healthy, getting lots of sleep, and learning how to rely more on herbs for natural healing rather than medication that may not be there for you in the future, or you might not be able to afford them because they're so outrageously priced, which they already are. And just the more physical labor that's going to be required out of us as we try to become more self-sufficient and not so dependent on somebody else to take care of us. We're going to need to be as fit as possible. Even if you are in a wheelchair, there are ways you can keep yourself more fit, even if it's just your upper body. Look at some of these people that are in wheelchairs, and they've just got really fit upper bodies because of the other things that they do to at least take care of themselves that way. They look very, very healthy. So there's plenty you can do, and I'm just giving you a few ideas based on what I do and what works for me, but you may have to find something different. But I'm hoping some of these suggestions will help you to kind of rethink the way you do things, and that exercise should be something we get all day long, not an expensive gym membership where you're down there for an hour at a time and then you get too busy and you can't keep up on it anyway. And the extra time and work it takes to go in there, or the requirement to wear things on your face where you can't get the oxygen that your body properly needs as you're working out. To me, that's kind of silly. You're a lot better off finding ways to get exercise at home while you're doing other projects that's more natural, and it's going to save you money in the long run and make you more healthy all the way around. And any ideas you have, any suggestions, especially for people who don't have full range of motion, be they bedridden, wheelchair ridden, or simply just can't get out. What are some other ideas that you might have that could be helpful or that you're doing that works for you? Please share those down below, because the more we can help each other out, be in just better health in general, the better off we're all going to be, and the better off we'll be able to tackle the things that we need to get done, as well as the things we may have to do as times get harder. All right, well, thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.